The cowboy ignored the rich heiress, and fell for the servant girl with nothing. Now the story began. The Texas sun beat down over the rolling hills, burning gold against a wide, endless sky. Dust swirled around the rattling stagecoach as it climbed the final ridge toward Werner Ranch, a vast empire of cattle, fences, and pride. Inside the coach sat Miss Charlotte Werner, lace-gloved hands folded neatly on her lap, though her expression betrayed both boredom and superiority. Her hat was imported from New York, her dress stitched from Parisian silk, and her eyes, green as prairie grass after rain, were trained on the horizon like she already owned it. When the coach jolted to a stop at the ranch gates, she pressed a lace handkerchief over her nose. "Heavens," she murmured, "does it always smell like this?" The driver tipped his hat. "Ma'am, that there's the smell of hard work. Nothing wrong with it." Charlotte stepped down, wincing as her polished boots touched the dusty ground. The ranch hands paused from their work, tipping hats, glancing at her, murmuring among themselves, all except one. A tall cowboy leaned against a post, sleeves rolled to his elbows, sweat glistening down his forearms. He didn't even look up. That was Jesse Rourke, the ranch's foreman, known for breaking wild horses and never breaking words. Charlotte noticed the slight and her pride flared. "And who," she asked the nearest hand, "is that man who can't even manage a greeting?" The young man chuckled nervously. "That's Jesse, ma'am. You'll get used to him. He don't say much to nobody." Jesse finally turned, squinting against the sun, then nodded once. "Ma'am?" Then he went right back to hammering the broken fence rail. Charlotte blinked, unsure if she'd just been insulted or dismissed. No man had ever dared ignore her before. The ranch house loomed ahead, big and weathered, its porch draped in the scent of cedar and coffee. Servants hurried to fetch her trunks. Inside, the hall smelled of saddle soap and dust, not perfume and polish. "Miss Werner," cried the housekeeper, bustling down the stairs. "Your father's in the study. He's been expecting you all morning." "Then he should have met me himself," Charlotte replied coolly, removing her gloves. Her father's voice echoed from the office. "Charlotte, stop terrorizing my staff and come here." She sighed and went in. At that same moment, out by the side yard, Clara May knelt over a bucket, scrubbing the veranda floor. Her hands were red from lye and cold water. She was young, maybe 20, but years of labor had made her shoulders stoop, her fingers rough. She heard the coach, heard the lady's voice, soft and sharp like glass breaking. And though she didn't look up, she could imagine the fine clothes, the proud tilt of her chin. Then Jesse walked by. She lifted her gaze just for a moment, long enough for their eyes to meet. He smiled, faint but real. A smile that said he saw her, not as help, not as invisible, but as a person. It startled her more than any word could. She ducked her head quickly, heart beating faster. The bucket sloshed, spilling soapy water on the steps. "Careful there," Jesse said, stepping up beside her. "Don't need you drown in the porch." Clara stammered, "Sorry, Mr. Rourke, I'll clean it up." "No need for Mr. anything. Jesse's fine." He crouched, steadying the bucket for her. "You new here?" She nodded. "Just a few months. I wash, mend, and cook when asked." "You do it all quiet," he said. "That's rare around here." Before Clara could reply, Charlotte's voice rang out from the porch doorway. "Jesse, my father wants you to fetch the rest of my trunks from the coach." Her tone was sweet, too sweet, but her eyes burned with challenge. Jesse straightened, tipped his hat politely. "Ma'am, I'm sure one of the men'll handle that. I got fence posts to finish before sundown." Charlotte blinked, caught off guard again. "I beg your pardon?" He didn't answer. He was already walking away. That night, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Charlotte sat by her window, still fuming. How dare that man treat her as though she were no different from any ranch hand? But out by the barn, Clara May hummed softly as she rinsed her apron under the pump. Jesse passed her again, carrying hay to the stalls. This time he didn't speak. Just gave her that same quiet, knowing look, a look that reached deeper than words. And somewhere between the dust and the dusk, one proud heart began to feel unseen, while another lonely one began to feel seen for the first time in her life. The next morning dawned soft and gold over the Werner Ranch. The mist curled low in the valley, and the smell of coffee and saddle leather filled the air. Jesse Rourke was already up before the sun, tightening his cinch strap, ready to ride the fence line. His horse, Dusty, pawed the ground impatiently. Jesse took a deep breath of the crisp morning air, quiet, steady, the way he liked it. Then, from behind him, came the clatter of heels and the sound of perfume in a place where it didn't belong. "Mr. Rourke," came a bright, honeyed voice. My father tells me you're the best man he's got." Jessie turned just enough to see Charlotte Verner, dressed in lavender silk, for a morning on a ranch, no less. Her parasol shimmered in the sunlight like something plucked from another world. "Morning, ma'am," he said simply. She tilted her chin. "I'd appreciate a tour of the property. Father says you know every inch of it." He tightened the saddle strap. "That's true. But I ain't much of a guide. You'd be better off asking one of the hands to show you around." Her brow furrowed just slightly. "I asked you." Jessie gave her a calm look, unreadable. "And I said no, ma'am. Not out of disrespect, just honesty. You'd find me poor company." Charlotte stood frozen, lips parting in disbelief. Before she could retort, Jessie swung up into the saddle, tipped his hat and rode off toward the hills. For the first time in her pampered life, someone had told her no. Down by the well, Clara May worked silently, drawing up water, her apron already damp. She watched Jessie's silhouette disappear into the horizon, a lone rider framed by the rising sun, and felt something twist softly inside her chest. She wasn't sure what it was, admiration, longing, or something even scarier. As she turned back to her work, her reflection shimmered faintly in the water. Behind her came the soft click of heels. Charlotte's voice sliced through the quiet. "You there, servant girl?" Clara froze. "Yes, ma'am?" Charlotte's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're Clara, isn't that right? My father mentioned a girl who helps in the kitchen." "Yes, ma'am." "Well, Clara, I'll need you to fetch some water to my quarters. And be quick about it. This heat is dreadful." Clara nodded, filling a smaller pail. But before she turned away, Charlotte glanced toward the open pastures where Jessie had ridden. "You know that cowboy, Jessie?" Clara hesitated. "I see him sometimes, yes." Charlotte's tone turned light, but her words were edged. "Men like him need reminding of their place. Ranch hands are useful, not important. Best you don't mistake his politeness for interest." Clara's throat tightened. I wouldn't, ma'am." Charlotte's smile widened, satisfied. "Good girl." Then she turned and swept away, leaving Clara standing in the dust, her cheeks burning with shame and something close to anger. By noon the ranch yard buzzed with noise. Cattle lowed, wheels creaked, and the smell of hot iron filled the air. Clara carried a tray of lemonade out to the men mending the corral. Jessie looked up as she approached. Sweat darkened his shirt, a streak of dirt crossed his cheek. "Careful with that," he teased softly as she handed him a cup. "You spill it and I'll be the one catching trouble." Clara smiled shyly. "You don't seem afraid of trouble, Mr. Rourke." He grinned. "Not the kind that's worth it." She looked up then, startled by the warmth in his tone. Her fingers brushed his as he took the cup, a fleeting contact that sent a spark through them both. Before either could speak again, Charlotte's voice cut through the air. "Mr. Rourke, my father wants you in the house immediately." The moment broke. Clara quickly stepped back, eyes down. Jessie set the cup aside and nodded toward Charlotte without much expression. "Yes, ma'am." Charlotte waited until Clara disappeared inside before speaking quietly to him. "She's a servant, Jessie. Best you remember that." He looked at her for a long, steady moment. "Funny thing about people, Miss Verner, dirt don't make 'em less human. Gold don't make 'em more." Charlotte's lips parted, but no words came. Jessie walked past her, leaving her standing in the dust, trembling, with anger and something she didn't yet understand. That night, long after supper, Clara sat alone by the servant quarters window. A storm was brewing far off, lightning crawling across the horizon. She thought about Jessie's words, his calm voice, the way he looked at her as if she mattered. Then, softly she whispered to herself, "I can't afford to dream." Outside, Jessie walked past the window heading toward the barn. He saw her silhouette through the glow of the oil lamp, small, quiet, and strong in her own way. He paused for a moment, tipping his hat to no one in particular, then smiled faintly to himself. "Maybe dreams ain't such a bad thing," he murmured. And as thunder rolled low over the plains, two hearts on opposite sides of the world, one in silk, one in rags, began to circle the same fire they couldn't yet name. Evening fell slow over Verner Ranch, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet. The lamps glowed warm in the great house, where silverware gleamed and laughter echoed, though not all laughter was kind. The ranch hands had been ordered to clean up for the occasion. The Verners were hosting a welcome dinner for Miss Charlotte's new life in the country. For most of the cowboys, it meant polishing boots that had never seen a ballroom and trying not to speak out of turn. For Clara May, it meant serving plates, pouring wine, and pretending she wasn't there. She moved between tables in silence, her eyes down, her apron pressed smooth. She knew every plate before it was empty and every whisper before it grew sharp. From across the long table, Jesse Rourke sat quiet, shoulders broad beneath a clean white shirt. His dark hair was still damp from a hurried wash in the creek. He looked uncomfortable under the chandelier's glow, out of place among the silk and laughter. And yet, even in stillness, he drew attention. Charlotte Verner had noticed that long before tonight. "Mr. Rourke," Charlotte said, her voice sweet and practiced. "I hope you don't mind my saying, you clean up surprisingly well for a cowboy." A few of the other guests chuckled. Jesse merely lifted his glass. "Ma'am, I reckon soap works the same on all of us." Her smile faltered a touch. "Of course." She leaned forward, trying again. "Father tells me you've worked here since you were a boy. That's loyal." "Just honest work," Jesse replied. "Nothing fancy about it." Charlotte tilted her head, studying him as though he were some creature she couldn't quite place, wild, stubborn, and immune to charm. And all the while, Clara refilled glasses and replaced bread baskets, keeping to the edges of the light. Yet she could feel Jesse's eyes, not staring but aware. Every time she passed behind him, his posture softened slightly, as if her presence calmed him. When she leaned down to set a dish near his arm, he murmured, "Careful there. You've been on your feet all day." She smiled faintly, whispering, "I'm used to it, sir." Charlotte's gaze flicked up, catching that brief exchange, the way his tone gentled, the way Clara's voice softened for him. Something ugly twisted in her chest. As dinner went on, Charlotte filled the air with talk of her time in Boston, of music halls, lace, and gentlemen who sent her roses. The ranch hands listened politely, though their eyes glazed over. Jesse sat still, cutting his steak without comment. At last, Charlotte turned to him again. "Surely, Mr. Rourke, you must have some grand story, some adventure to share?" He met her gaze, calm as ever. "No grand stories, ma'am. Just work, dust, and horses that don't like to be told what to do." "Well," she said with a brittle laugh, "you and they must get along perfectly then." The men around the table snorted with quiet amusement. Jesse only smiled slightly. "Guess you're right." But his eyes slid, just briefly, to the corner where Clara stood by the doorway, her hands clasped tight. She smiled too, small, secret, like the two of them shared some truth that no one else understood. Charlotte saw it. And the smile she'd forced all evening finally cracked. Later, when the plates were cleared and candles burned low, Charlotte followed Jesse out onto the veranda. The night air was cool, filled with the hum of crickets and the scent of cedar smoke. "You left before dessert," she said, folding her arms. "Do I bore you so terribly?" Jesse leaned on the railing, eyes fixed on the open plains. "No, ma'am. You just talk about places that don't exist for folks like me." Hard to know what to say back. She frowned. "You think I'm spoiled?" He looked over, his gaze steady, not cruel, just honest. "I think you ain't had to earn the things you've been given. That's not your fault. But it makes it hard to understand folks who have." For a moment, her face softened, almost hurt. "And the servant girl? You seem to understand her just fine." Jesse straightened, jaw tightening. "That girl's got more grit than most men I've ridden with. I reckon that deserves respect." Charlotte's lips trembled with quiet fury. "Respect," she repeated, "or something else?" Jesse's silence was answer enough. She turned sharply, her silk skirt swishing. "You'll regret speaking to me that way." He watched her go, then muttered, "Doubt it." Inside, Clara stood just beyond the doorway, her heart pounding. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the words reached her all the same. Jesse respected her. Not pitted. Not ignored. Respected. When she finally looked out through the open door, he was still standing by the railing, head bowed, one hand gripping the wood like he was holding back something he couldn't say. For a moment she thought of stepping out, thanking him, maybe just being there. But then she remembered her place. Servants didn't stand under starlight beside men like him. So she turned away quietly, her heart warm and aching all at once. And out on that dark porch, Jesse Rourke watched the lights fade inside the house and whispered under his breath, "Some folks shine without trying." The days after the dinner carried a strange hush around Verner Ranch. The air itself seemed thick with the weight of things unsaid. The cowboys worked slower than usual, trading glances when Jesse Rourke rode by. Whispers trailed behind him like dust off a horse's hooves. "Word is," one said under his breath, "the boss's girl had eyes for Rourke." "Boss's girl?" another snorted. "Heard it was the servant he's sweet on." No matter which rumor folks believed, one thing was sure. Jesse had drawn attention he never wanted. That afternoon, Clara May worked in the laundry house, steam curling around her face as she scrubbed linens raw against the washboard. Her thoughts were miles away, back to that dinner, that soft tone in Jesse's voice when he'd spoken of her with respect. For a girl who'd grown used to silence, the memory felt like sunlight. The door creaked open. She turned, expecting another servant, and froze instead. Mr. William Werner, the ranch owner himself, filled the doorway. His frame was wide, his presence heavier still. "You're Clara, ain't you?" he said. She straightened quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, sir." He stepped closer, the wooden floor groaning beneath his boots. "I hear you've been catching the attention of one of my cowboys." Her face went pale. "Sir, I haven't done anything improper." He chuckled, low and cold. "Improper or not, I don't care. What I do care about is distraction. Jesse Rourke's one of my best men. If he's busy mooning over a wash girl, he ain't doing his job." Clara's throat tightened. "I never asked for his attention, sir." Werner studied her, eyes sharp as a hawk's. "You didn't have to. Some women pull men in without even trying. Best you remember your place, girl. This ranch don't take kindly to trouble." He turned and left, leaving the door open, and a chill that no sun could warm. Clara sank against the wall, heart hammering. For the first time, she understood how dangerous feelings could be in a world that didn't belong to her. That evening, Jesse came back from the north pasture, dust caked on his boots, his shirt torn where barbed wire had caught it. He found Clara by the pump, shoulders slumped as she filled the water buckets. "Clara," he said softly. "You all right?" She kept her eyes on the ground. "You shouldn't talk to me out here. Folks are saying things." "I don't care what they say." "Well, I do," she snapped, then caught herself, her voice trembling. "Mr. Werner came by the laundry house today. He told me to remember my place. I can't afford to lose this job, Jesse." He frowned, stepping closer. "You didn't do nothing wrong." "That doesn't matter," she said, tears glinting in her eyes. "It never does." Jesse hesitated, then reached out, rough hand brushing hers, slow, careful, like one might touch something breakable. "I ain't lettin' anyone scare you," he said. "Not him, not anybody." Clara pulled her hand away, though her voice shook when she whispered, "You can't protect me from the world, Jesse." "Maybe not," he said, his voice low, "but I'll stand beside you in it." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The silence between them felt fragile and real, something they both wanted to keep. Then a shadow moved at the far end of the barn, a figure watching. Charlotte Werner stood in that shadow, her fingers tight around the edge of her shawl. She'd come looking for Jesse only to find this. Clara May, the servant girl, standing too close. The cowboy too gentle. Her breath hitched, half hurt, half rage. When she returned to the big house, her father noticed the storm in her eyes. "What's got into you, girl?" he asked. "It's that cowboy," she said bitterly. "He's making a fool of you, of all of us. And she bit the word back, trembling. "She doesn't deserve the way he looks at her." Mr. Werner's expression hardened. "Then I'll handle it." "No," Charlotte said suddenly, straightening her spine. "I will." Her father's brows lifted. "You?" "I know how to make people remember their place," she said, her voice cold and calm. That night, a storm rolled over the plains, wind howling across the open hills. Jesse lay awake in the bunkhouse, listening to the thunder. He thought about Clara's eyes, the way she'd looked when she said she was afraid. He wasn't used to caring about anyone. Not like this. And somewhere deep down he knew, this wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a fight waiting to happen. Meanwhile, in her small servant room, Clara whispered into the dark, "Lord, please, let him forget me." But tears betrayed her, falling quietly onto the pillow. And out on the veranda, Charlotte stood watching the rain, her face pale, her heart burning with something that looked a lot like love, but felt a lot like vengeance. The days leading up to the fire were restless ones. The ranch yard buzzed with unease, not the kind you could see but the kind you felt deep in your bones. Charlotte Werner's smiles had grown sharper. Clara May's hands trembled more often when she worked. And Jesse Rourke, though he said little, moved like a man who sensed the storm before it broke. That night began like any other. The cattle pens were quiet, the lanterns in the main house glowed softly, and the wind carried the scent of rain from far off. Clara finished her work late, wiping her brow as she stacked folded linens on the shelf. The night air was still, almost heavy. Somewhere out in the dark, a coyote cried. She was heading back toward the servant quarters when she smelled it, faint at first, then stronger. Smoke. Her heart stuttered. A flicker of orange lit the barn roof. Then a crack, and suddenly the night erupted in flame. "Fire!" someone shouted. "The stables are burnin'." The yard came alive in chaos. Men running, horses screaming, sparks raining down like 1,000 angry stars. Jesse burst from the bunkhouse barefoot, shirt half-buttoned, grabbing a bucket before his mind could catch up. "Get the horses out," he roared. "Now." He ran through the smoke, coughing, eyes stinging, pulling open stall doors and slapping reins to send panicked animals into the yard. Then he heard a scream. "Help. Somebody help." It was Charlotte, trapped near the front of the barn, her dress caught on a splintered beam. Jesse charged through the smoke, threw his coat over her, and yanked her free just as the roof above groaned and fell. He dragged her outside, coughing, eyes watering. "You all right?" he asked, voice rough. Charlotte clung to him, shaking. "You saved me." But before he could answer, another voice cut through the chaos, faint, desperate, and far more important to him. "Jesse." He turned toward the sound. Claire. She was still inside. Without a thought, Jesse ran back into the burning barn. Flames clawed at the rafters. Smoke curled thick and black. He found her near the rear stall, trying to free a colt tangled in rope. "Clara, what the hell are you doing?" he shouted. She coughed, tears streaking her soot-covered face. "I couldn't leave him. He's just a baby." He didn't let her finish. He grabbed her around the waist, pulling her close. "You can't save nothing if you're dead, you hear me?" Together, they untangled the colt and slapped its flank, sending it bolting toward the door. Then the floor above them groaned. "Run!" Jesse yelled. They sprinted, half stumbling, just as the beam above came crashing down. Jesse shoved Clara forward, taking the blow across his back. They hit the ground outside, rolling in the dirt, coughing and gasping for air. "Jesse!" Clara cried, hands trembling as she helped him sit up. "I'm fine," he rasped. "You're what matters." Her eyes filled with tears, not from smoke this time. Behind them, the barn collapsed in a thunder of fire. By dawn, the flames were gone, leaving only blackened beams and ash where the stables had stood. The ranch yard was quiet, eerily so. Charlotte sat wrapped in a blanket, her hair tangled, her face pale. She watched from the porch as Jesse knelt beside Clara near the well, helping her wash soot from her face. Clara's hands shook as she whispered, "You shouldn't have gone back for me." Jesse smiled faintly, brushing a stray curl from her forehead. "You think I'd let that barn take you? Not a chance." Charlotte's lips parted as she watched them, his tenderness, her trembling smile. Something inside her broke clean in two. A few hours later, Mr. Werner returned from town, his eyes widening at the ruins. "Who's responsible for this?" he barked. One of the hands muttered, "Could have been a lantern-left Hanjin, sir. Or maybe—" He hesitated, glancing toward the house. "Maybe someone wanted a little excitement." Charlotte flinched. Werner looked around sharply, then spotted Jesse helping Clara to her feet. His jaw tightened. "You've done enough," he said coldly. "I'll deal with this mess, and with you." Jesse stood tall. "If you're looking for someone to blame, start with me. I was the one inside." "You?" Werner growled. "I told you to stay away from that girl. Now my stables are gone and my daughter nearly burned alive." Clara stepped forward, trembling. "It wasn't his fault." "Hush, girl," Werner snapped. "No, sir," Jesse said, stepping between them. "She's got every right to speak." For a long, tense moment, the yard fell silent. The smoke, the ash, the rising sun, it all hung heavy. Finally, Werner pointed toward the road. "You're finished here, Rourke. You and that girl. Both gone by sundown." Clara's breath caught. "Please, sir." But Jesse only nodded, eyes calm and steady. "We'll be gone." When the Werners turned away, Clara whispered, "You shouldn't have stood up for me." He looked at her, voice low and certain. "I've been fightin' other folks' battles my whole life. First time it feels like I'm fightin' the right one." And as the sun climbed higher, glinting over the ashes, Clara realized something. From the flames of destruction, love had survived, quiet, stubborn, and unburned. The fire left the Werner ranch scarred, not just in wood and ash but in spirit. Charred beams still smoked at dawn, and every worker walked slower, quieter, as though afraid of stirring ghosts. But none were more silent than Jesse Rourke and Clara May. By midday they had gathered their few belongings, a rolled blanket, a pair of worn gloves, a tin cup. The air between them felt heavy with all the words they hadn't said. "Guess this is it," Jesse muttered, tightening the cinch on his saddle. Clara stood a few paces away, clutching a small satchel. "I could ask Miss Werner to change her father's mind," she said softly. "Maybe if she speaks for you." He stopped, looking at her with tired eyes. "You don't owe that woman a single word. She'd rather see you gone, same as him." Clara lowered her gaze. I just don't want you losing your home because of me. Jessie gave a low laugh, not cruel but sad. I never had a home here. Just a roof and work. You were the only thing that ever made it feel like one. Her breath hitched and she turned away so he wouldn't see the tears. From the porch, Charlotte Werner watched them. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. Her father stood beside her, anger simmering beneath a composed exterior. Let them go, he said. The man's pride will keep him from begging. The girl's too foolish to leave without him. Problem solves itself. Charlotte hesitated, then asked, and if he never comes back? Werner gave a cold smile. Then I'll consider my daughter lucky. But deep down, Charlotte didn't feel lucky at all. An hour later, Jessie and Clara were nearly ready to ride out when a ranch hand approached, looking uneasy. Rourke, he muttered, Mr. Werner wants you up at the house. Says he's got something to offer before you go. Jessie frowned. Now what's he plannin'? Clara reached for his arm. Maybe it's forgiveness? He gave her a look that said he didn't believe in that kind of mercy. But he went anyway. Inside the big house, the air smelled of whiskey and oil. Werner stood behind his desk, glass in hand, while Charlotte lingered by the window wringing her gloves. Jessie stopped at the door, hat in hand. You wanted to see me? Werner didn't look up right away. You're a good worker, Rourke. Hard to replace a man who knows horses like you. Jessie said nothing. I'll make you an offer, Werner continued. Stay on the ranch. Double wages. Your own quarters. But. His eyes hardened. The girl leaves. Tonight. The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. Charlotte turned quickly. Father. Enough, he snapped. A man's got to decide whether he wants love or a future. He can't have both when they come from different worlds. Jessie's jaw flexed. He spoke slowly. You think you can buy my loyalty with coin and kill my heart with orders? Werner shrugged. You can walk out that door a pauper with a servant girl or stay and become a man of means. Which is it? Charlotte's eyes met Jessie's, pleading, almost hopeful. You could have everything, she whispered. Just let her go. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned toward the window where the sun spilled gold over the blackened barns. Finally he said, a man who trades love for comfort ain't a man I care to be. Werner's face reddened. Then you're a fool. Maybe so, Jessie said. But I'm her fool. And he turned and walked out. Clara was waiting near the corral, hands twisting in her apron. When she saw him coming, her voice trembled. What did he say? Jessie smiled faintly, though his eyes were heavy. He offered me the world if I'd leave you behind. She swallowed hard. And? I told him the world ain't worth much without you in it. Her breath caught. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the dusty yard and the man who stood before her like a stubborn angel made of grit and scars. Then where will we go? She whispered. Anywhere that don't smell like his money, Jessie said softly. There's a small valley west of here, water, grass, peace. We'll start there. Clara nodded slowly, the faintest smile trembling on her lips. Together? Together, he promised. He helped her into the saddle, mounted his own horse beside her, and turned one last time to look back at the Werner ranch, the place that had tried to break them. Smoke still drifted from the ruins of the barn, curling into the pink of the sunset like ghosts letting go. Then Jessie Rourke and Clara May rode away, their silhouettes swallowed by the endless, golden light of the dying day. The trail west stretched endless beneath the afternoon sun. Dust rose from the horses' hooves, curling into the blue distance like smoke from old memories. Jessie and Clara rode in silence most of the way, not from weariness, but from the peace that settles when words finally run out and hearts understand each other. They stopped by a clear-running creek just as the sun began to drop behind the hills. The air smelled of pine and wild sage, and the silence felt like a benediction. Jessie dismounted first, tying his horse to a post of driftwood. He turned to Clara, who sat still in the saddle, her hair tangled with wind. This here, he said quietly, might not be much to look at now, but it's the cleanest air I ever breathed. Fresh start kind of place. Clara slid down, her worn boots sinking into the soft grass. She looked around, the valley, the stream, the lonely beauty of it all, and her eyes filled. It's perfect, she whispered. It's ours. Jessie smiled faintly. Ain't no one to tell us where we belong now. We build it, we keep it. He started unpacking supplies from the saddle, and soon a small fire crackled to life, painting their faces in warm gold. That night, they sat side by side beneath a sky wide enough to swallow the world. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter, gazing up at the stars. Back at the ranch, she said softly, I used to pray I'd find a place where no one could look at me and see what I wasn't. Jesse turned his head. And what did they see? A servant? A poor girl. Someone small. She smiled faintly, blinking back tears. But you saw more. He poked at the fire with a stick. I didn't see more. I just saw you. The rest was noise. For a while only the crickets spoke. Then Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. And what about you, Jesse? What did you want before all this? He thought for a moment, eyes fixed on the flames. Peace, he said. Ain't had it since I was a boy. Folks keep telling me peace is bought with money or land, but I reckon it's bought with love and a little bit of fight. She smiled softly. Then you paid the price. Weeks passed and the land began to answer their labor. They built a small cabin from pine logs Jesse cut himself. Clara planted a garden, her laughter mixing with the wind as she worked barefoot in the dirt. At dawn, he'd ride to hunt or fetch wood. At dusk, she'd be waiting by the fire with stew simmering in a tin pot. Their hands grew rough, their clothes worn, but neither had ever looked so alive. One evening, as summer bent toward fall, Jesse came in from the fields carrying a small wildflower. He set it gently on the table before her. Figured this belongs to you. Tough little thing growing out of dry rock. Clara looked at the bloom, then up at him. It's beautiful. He shrugged, smiling shyly. So are you. She laughed softly, shaking her head. You say things like that, I'll start believing them. Then maybe you should, he said simply. Her heart caught. There was no charm in his voice, no flattery, just truth. The kind that lives quiet and sure in a man who's been through fire. That night, as rain began to patter gently on the cabin roof, Jesse reached across the small space between them. Clara, he said, voice low and rough, you know I ain't much good with fancy words. But I reckon I know this much, I'll spend whatever years I got left making sure you never feel small again. She covered his hand with hers. And I'll spend mine reminding you that peace ain't something you find, it's something you build. They stayed that way a long while, the firelight flickering across their faces, the world outside fading into rain and night. By morning the valley shone clean and new, washed by the storm. Smoke curled from the chimney and wildflowers bent under the weight of dew. Jesse stood at the doorway, arm around Clara, watching sunlight spill over their land. Looks like the good Lord gave us a fresh start, he murmured. Clara smiled up at him, eyes bright. Or maybe he just gave us each other. He bent his head and kissed her, slow and steady, not the desperate kiss of two people escaping the past, but the gentle promise of those who found home at last. Years later, travelers passing through the valley would speak of a cabin near the creek, smoke always rising, horses grazing free, laughter echoing through the hills. They said a cowboy and a woman lived there, the kind who worked harder than most and loved truer than any. And if you asked Jesse Rourke what he'd gained from walking away from wealth, he'd smile and say, everything worth keeping.